Some creatures have a very special story. They were driven out by humans through monocultures, mining, or manufacturing. But in some places, nature is reclaiming its own. These are stories of change and of hope. The color green is found here in every shade and hue. Costa Rica is famous for its extensive national parks and fascinating forests. But for a long time, things looked very different here. Over centuries, people in Costa Rica felled tree after tree. Whole forests had to make way, above all for agriculture. Nowadays, conservationists throughout the country are demonstrating that tropical forests can grow back if they're given the chance and humans lend a helping hand. Along with the tropical forests, a unique realm of animals and plants returns. Elsewhere, trees continue to be felled. But in Costa Rica, Operation Tropical Forest is a success. How come? The Rio Pacuare in eastern Costa Rica looks like a tropical paradise. You'd think it had always been like this. The plant and animal diversity is great. There are over 900 species of bird in Costa Rica. Many of them are also here on the Rio Pacuare. Herons find crustaceans in the river. And fish. Toucans are in their element, as are green iguanas and tree frogs. The Rio Pacuare offers many species their niche, but this nature paradise has only been re-established here for a few decades. Before that, Costa Rica had taken a very different direction. The increasing destruction of the tropical forests had become ever more intense. They had to give way to plantations, especially for lucrative fruits like coffee beans and bananas. Then there were pineapple and coconut plantations, as well as livestock pastures. By the early 1980s, 3/4 of Costa Rica's virgin forests had been destroyed. Even the Rio Pacuare was lined with cattle pastures, until a group of businessmen set out to bring the tropical forest back to the banks of the river. Fernando Esquivel is the owner of the Rios Tropicales company. He loves the tropical rainforest, and he and his business partners actually live from the now unspoilt nature along the river. This is the perfect place for the jungle adventures that Fernando offers his guests.
¿Por qué quiere venir a Costa Rica? No quiere venir a ver ciudades y castillos.
Why do tourists come to Costa Rica? Not to see cities and temples. They come to see nature and how we Costa Ricans interact with nature. And that's exactly what we can show them here.
Fernando and his partners built a lodge right on the river. They're specialists in a unique type of thrill. Rio Pacuare has become one of the world's favorite rivers for rafting. Tourists have their fun, and they're also part of Fernando's plan to reforest more and more land around the river. In the nearby village of El Tigre, Fernando and his team are continuing with what began on the Rio Pacuare. They've been working with the villagers for more than 15 years. Fernando regularly visits his neighbors. Some of them collect the seeds from indigenous trees, like those of the almendro, and grow them into seedlings.
¿Cómo está? Llegamos al laboratorio.
The lodge buys them from the villagers for its conservation project.
3 meses. Buenísimo.
So it's good for the rainforest and for the local people as well.
Nature protection with no economic benefit for the people may work elsewhere, but we want the locals to really benefit as well.
The saplings are intended for former cattle grazing fields. Fernando's company has bought up a lot of pastures in the area that weren't very profitable. This was made possible by the income from river tourism. This whole area used to be tropical rainforest. In future, the saplings grown by the villagers will grow into a new forest. Fernando's company employs locals to plant the trees. Gradually, they're reforesting the former cattle pastures. Species which have become rare, like this pilon or bully tree, will later bear a lot of fruit and feed numerous bird species. Trees grow fast in the tropical climate, 2 to 3 meters a year. This has created a private forest conservation area of around 2,000 hectares on the Rio Pacuare. Not huge in itself, but in the meantime, over 7,000 landowners in Costa Rica are conducting similar projects, and they're being funded by the government.
En esos años, cuando se inició, que había ganado y eso se sacó el ganado At the start, there were only cattle pastures here. Now, it's great reforestation. Only 12 years later, we have a new forest.
Thanks to efforts like this, the hills along the river are slowly becoming overgrown. But the success is on shaky ground. Since the global corona pandemic, many tourist companies in Costa Rica are struggling to survive. A lot has already been achieved, though. This small tributary of the Rio Pacuare also used to be surrounded by grazing land. Now the area is hardly distinguishable from virgin forest. Animals also benefit from the trees, like these shimmering masters of the air. And others that take things a little easier. Three-toed sloths are unhurried leaf eaters. Their vegetarian diet is low in calories, so they don't do anything hastily to save energy. Where the trees are growing again, the sloths are also multiplying. The young are carried aloft all day through the treetops. Hummingbirds are dependent on the diversity of plants. Where particularly nutritious flowers tempt them, they tank up again and again on their fuel. What's been successful along the Rio Pacuare with the help of tourism has to inspire hope. But how can business and nature conservation continue to be combined at a time of dwindling travelers? Costa Rica is a modern country with cities, industry and traffic. And it's also recognized the value of intact nature for the quality of life of its inhabitants. In the province of Guanacaste in the northwest, pastures for cattle and horses dominate the countryside. But the region is also home to a very special forest. The tropical dry forest stretches to the Pacific coast. In the dry season from December to May, many of its trees lose their leaves. This is where the Santa Rosa National Park has been created, named after the vast cattle farm it replaced. A reminder of that time is the main house of the hacienda, now the visitor center of the park. At the start, the national park consisted of just a small remnant of the dry forest. Jorge Blanco and Felix Carmona were already on the staff over 35 years ago, when a bold plan was hatched. The vast grazing meadows of the ranch surrounding the park were also to be reforested. The land was bought up without further ado, with donations and government support.
There was a finca here, a huge cattle ranch. They also grew rice and sugarcane, intensive agriculture. But more than 35 years ago, we started to bring back the original ecosystem.
The land surrounding the national park today still looks as it did when the biologists faced a gigantic task. Never before had anyone tried to bring back a dry forest on such a scale. How could it be done? In the past, the dry forest stretched along the whole Pacific coast of Central America. 300 years ago, the Spanish colonial rulers had already begun to clear the unique ecosystem, until only small patches remained. Forestry expert Felix Carmona is looking for the place where the reforestation began. It takes him a while to find what he's looking for. The marker tells him that he himself planted this guapinol tree.
Sembramos este arbolito por acá.
When I find one of these trees, I'm really pleased. I know then that the work's been worthwhile. The tree will be here for 100 years, attracting birds that spread the seeds. Animals that live on the ground also come and help the process.
Animals like agoutis ensure that, from the basis of the individual planted trees, the forest virtually recreates itself. With amazing success. Today, the new dry forest in northwest Costa Rica is over 8 times as big as the island of Manhattan. In some places, though, Jorge and his team reach their limits. Centuries of livestock farming have left the soil so exhausted that hardly anything can grow. Here they have to try different methods. Bordering the park, a fruit juice factory manages huge orange plantations. The oranges are used for their juice, and their peel has to be disposed of as waste. Couldn't this be useful for nature conservation, wondered the national park people?
We thought, these skins are organic, so some creature in the park must like eating them. We signed a contract and started a pilot project.
Over 1,000 truckloads of orange peel were spread in the park. In just a few months, billions of fly larvae had consumed the lot. The result? Fertile soil. And the first new plants established themselves. Where hardly a blade of grass had stood a chance for decades, suddenly bushes were growing. And then trees, all by themselves. Felix Carmona is thrilled at how thick the layer of humus has since become.
This is pure soil. The earth has become richer and richer in nutrients, including what the plants have let fall. It's really deep. And here, where everything was full of stones, I don't find any more stones at all.
Exactly where the orange waste was spread, there are now more than 150 different species of plants growing. 7 times as many as before the trial began. Nevertheless, a court put a stop to the project. It prohibited any more waste material being disposed of in a national park. That's why, on the other side of the path, the ground is still as desolate as before.
O sea, fue un proyecto ecológicamente exitoso, pero
The project was an ecological success, but the rules of a national park prevented us from carrying on with it.
entonces nos vimos en un
So
problema
we had to stop.
administrativo legal y que hizo que el proyecto se parara.
But we did prove one thing. You can use plant residues to revive the dry forest here in Costa Rica.
Acá en Costa Rica.
The conservationists still faced plenty of other challenges. They wanted to link the dry forest on the coast with wooded areas in the mountains. The idea was to create a biological corridor to the cloud forests on the slopes of the Orosi volcano. Donations from around the world bought up over 350 cattle farms to reforest the grazing land in the area. It's not dry forest here, but a special mixture of mountain woodlands and cloud forests. It's hard to believe that this bit of forest is just 20 years old. The forest is in good health, but Felix Carmona keeps coming across individual trees that are losing their leaves and dying. They are gamelina trees that Felix Carmona and his team planted themselves. Their idea was these trees grow fast, so they could provide shade for the young mountain forests growing back on the former cattle ranches. It was a bold move, since the species actually comes from Asia and doesn't belong here. So what's happening to the gamelina trees? Leafcutter ants are responsible for the trees dying. Just what the biologists of the national park had wanted. The indigenous forest is spreading quickly, and that's brought in the insects, which like feeding on gamelinas. The indigenous trees are attuned to the ants, while the Asiatic trees die off, just as the biologists planned. Along with the mountain forest, more and more creatures are returning to the volcano's slopes. The Tamandua anteater finds ample food here. With every plant and animal species that re-establishes itself, the natural balance becomes more stable. Tens of thousands of insect species, predators, and insect and plant eaters are flourishing and mutually control one another in the recovering forest. The strategy of the biologists proved correct. The greater the species diversity, the better it is for the young forest. The Asiatic gamelinas have done their job. The mountain forest now links once isolated habitats together. So 3 national parks in the northwest of Costa Rica have combined to form the Guanacosta Reserve. It stretches from the cloud forests of the volcano down to the dry forest on the coast, an area bigger than that of Greater London, in which animals have ample space to move about. There's enough space even for the previously rare jaguar. And hunting grounds for American crocodiles over 4 meters in length. The nature reserve actually extends beyond the coast and into the Pacific. Fishing in the ocean is as prohibited as hunting on land. The animals in the park live largely undisturbed, so there are some exceptional sights to be witnessed once the sun goes down. The Guanacaste Nature Reserve is one of the few remaining places on Earth where the olive ridley sea turtle returns to land to lay its eggs in the sand. The jaguars of the national park are waiting for them. What happens now has so far only been observed here. It's brutal. But for the conservationists in Costa Rica, it's a sign that their work is succeeding. Nature takes its own course, and thanks to the food they find here, the rare big cats are breeding again. And neither are the biologists worried about the sea turtle population. Most of them return to the sea. The jaguars pose no threat to their survival. The vast Guanacaste Nature Reserve is a success story. And it's not the only one. A quarter of Costa Rica is now under nature protection. That's exemplary worldwide. But this too is Costa Rica. Along with tourism, agriculture is still one of the most important economic factors. Huge plantations slice through the country. That's why most of the national parks are a long way from one another. Pineapple growing in particular has been booming for some years. And that takes up vast areas. Many of the fields were still forest until recently. But in the midst of the most important pineapple growing regions, there are also farms which are taking a different path. They're pinning their hopes on small fields, surrounded by tropical rainforest. They're showing that agriculture and nature protection can go hand in hand. This farm is a family business. Rosa Barrantes is the third generation running the farm.
It's a family tradition. My grandfather left it to my father, and he to us. And he told us, never destroy nature.
That's why on Rosa Barrantes' finca, fields alternate with forest. Wooded areas like these are important. They give animals the chance to wander, from one national park or nature reserve to the next. Scarlet macaws find food here. These large, colourful birds used to be caught in their thousands for the animal trade. Nowadays, they're a protected species and are increasing again. The more wooded areas they find, the better. Even a group of mantled howler monkeys has established itself here. Every day they watch Rosaura and her employees working on the fields and thrive on the great variety of leaves in the forest. The monkeys aren't the only ones to benefit from Rosaura's eco-corridors. The trees attract numerous other species, insects, birds, and even wild cats. A nimble hunter is prowling through the forest, an ocelot. Its favorite food? Rodents. Rosaura's farm benefits from the wild cats and snakes hunting here.
Y como está la montaña cerca,
Animals come from the forest and the mountains nearby and eat the rats.
la rata,
And that reduces our costs for pest control.
nos bajan los costos de contaminación.
Rosaura aims to be able to do without chemical pesticides altogether in a few years' time. To that end, she's found herself a special business partner. Luciano Nicolis exports organic pineapples. He supports producers in Costa Rica who want to run their farms on eco-friendly lines. Luciano is convinced that the market for organic fruit will continue to grow in future. European retail chains in particular are selling more and more organic pineapples. Pineapple exports from Costa Rica have already overtaken bananas.
¿Es todo este blog, don Luciano?
Dulce.
To become organic, conventional farmers have to restructure, which is not easy.
Ahorramos mañana.
More toxic pesticides are sprayed on pineapples than on virtually any other crop. Their job is to keep the fruit free of pests and diseases. What Rosaura sprays on her farm is not chemicals, but biological pesticides and soil bacteria, which act as fertilizer. So the soil and the groundwater are not polluted. And organic farmers don't have to accept lower yields. Rosaura and the other organic farmers are harvesting the same amount of pineapples per hectare as farmers working conventionally. Even so, only a small number of farmers have so far converted to organic. In Luciano Nicolis's company, the fruit is prepared for dispatch, for the journey by ship to Europe. Rosaura's fruit shows how the pineapple business can be run without destroying Costa Rica's rainforests. The idea of giving something back to nature is inspiring more and more Costa Ricans. Like the neighbors of the country's largest privately owned nature reserve, the Bosque de los Niños, this huge area, measuring 220 square kilometers, was bought piece by piece with donations from school children around the world, and then reforested. Hence, the Forest of the Children. A small lodge for tourists has been built a few kilometers away from the reserve, near the village of La Tigra. A lot of visitors come to the La Tigra Lodge because of some special inhabitants of the forest. But they only appear at night. Lodge manager Adolfo Quesada likes to present the tropical frogs to his guests by torchlight, which doesn't disturb them. They include one of the superstars of Costa Rica's animal kingdom. The red-eyed tree frog is the unofficial national symbol of Costa Rica. These croaking beauties breed around the pond next to the lodge. Also found here is the strawberry poison dart frog. Through eating certain ants, its skin becomes toxic, which makes it inedible for frog eaters. The lodge is surrounded by a small forest, which the operators planted themselves. After a serious illness, Adolfo Quesada gave up his old job and devoted himself to nature conservation. A decision he's never regretted. But since the corona pandemic, his nature paradise is jeopardized by the lack of tourists. Adolfo regularly checks whether the frogs have been joined by other animals in his patch of forest. He uses an automatic video trap, which records anything moving in front of the camera. And he's not disappointed. Martens are hunting in the forest again. Wild boars search for fallen fruit. Great tinamous and Central American agoutis feel at home here. But the lodge operator hopes for many more animals. He's set his sights on the huge conservation area nearby, the Forest of the Children, and his plans are ambitious.
One of the main reasons for our La Tigra project is to join our forest down here with the forest up in the mountains, with the Bosque de los Niños conservation area. This will serve as a buffer zone and a biological corridor where the animals can live, move around, and reproduce.
A lot of gaps still need filling if the corridor's going to work. But buying up cattle pastures and planting trees is not cheap. The estimated cost of 300,000 euros would be too much for the lodge alone.
We're a small project and don't make a huge amount. But we're looking for ways to save this country and reforest it.
For a long time, Adolfo's eco-corridor remained a dream. Then German partners of the lodge stepped in and organized a loan. But Adolfo had to be creative to earn the money for the repayments. Tourists and small companies would pay for the reforestation by lending a hand themselves. For $30, they all get their own tree.
Around 4 kilometers from here.
And a place to plant it themselves. Then the lodge staff look after the sapling for 3 years until it's big enough to survive on its own without further attention. That's the plan. But the biological corridor will only be completed if tourists continue to come to La Tigra. The dry forest in the province of Guanacaste was the model for many such success stories. It's an example of how a national park teeming with animals can develop, even in areas where agriculture has been practiced for centuries. But for some years now, the scientists have been registering changes in the Santa Rosa National Park, which are a cause for concern. Jorge Blanco, research director of the Nature Reserve, and his colleagues constantly keep watch on how the flora and fauna are developing.
Sí. Allá se ve, vamos a ver si vemos tal vez. Ya se fue Jennifer. Sí, ya se fue.
On this day, they come across Colombian white-faced capuchin monkeys clambering through the treetops in search of fruit and insects. They're thriving in the national park. So far.
Aquella punta que se ve allá. Era allá, aquella punta.
For the last 10 years or so, many animals in the dry forest have been finding less and less food. Fruit and insects are becoming rarer. In the long term, this is a threat to birds and reptiles, as well as mammals like the capuchin monkeys. What's causing the changes? Jorge and his colleagues have noticed that the dry seasons are lasting longer and longer in the region. And even in the rainy seasons, the rains often don't come. In the middle of the dry forest, scientists from the University of Minnesota are simulating what will happen if this trend continues. Using corrugated roofs, they channel part of the rainfall away from a small test site. They measure how the plants react to this man-made drought, how many leaves they have, and how they're growing.
Tiene un diámetro de 15.9.
It emerges that many trees are under stress. They're shedding their leaves and growing more slowly. Some are dying off altogether.
Temperatura, humedad, la hojarasca.
Temperature, humidity, fewer leaves on the trees. These are drastic changes for plants.
O sea, la preocupación
So we're very worried about the dry forest.
con lo que se refiere al bosque seco.
Climate change is making the whole province of Guanacaste drier and drier. And drought intensifies another problem. For decades, the livestock farmers around the park have been planting an African pasture grass, which has spread into the national park itself. In the dry season, the grass becomes highly inflammable. Discarded cigarettes, a lightning strike, and fires soon start which can quickly become wildfires. Different from in the African savanna, the plants in Guanacaste are not adapted to bushfires. That's why these are important members of staff in the nature reserve. The park has its own herd of cattle. The cows keep the aggressive pasture grass short, but just on the edges of the national park. The conservationists would like to have the cattle in the park as well, but that's prohibited. Livestock aren't allowed in the Santa Rosa National Park, even though these living mowing machines function remarkably well. All around the reserve, the cattle have just one job: eating as much grass as they can. Where the cattle are banned, other methods of preventing wildfires are needed. There are fire stations throughout the park. Otherwise, the danger of bushfires, which would destroy over 35 years' work, would be too great. During the dry season, the fire stations are manned around the clock. The bomberos, the firefighters, report even the smallest column of smoke to headquarters. Then there's no time to lose. In the bone-dry forest, fires can spread like wildfire. In the low rainfall Guanacaste, fighting bushfires is just as important as planting trees. The firefighters often have to put out several fires a week in the dry season. The bomberos are kept busy. Many people living in the province are so attached to their unique forest that they support the firemen as volunteers. The quicker the firemen can be on the spot, the fewer trees will fall victim to the flames, and the more species-rich the recreated dry forest will be. Firefighters, cattle, orange peel as fertilizer. Creativity belongs to the work of the conservationists in Costa Rica.
Nosotros nos consideramos como médicos.
We see ourselves as the doctors of biodiversity and of the forest. In the last 35 years, we've done various things to help heal what man destroyed here. We have the forest back with us now, and that's what's important.
Whether in the dry forest in Guanacaste or the rainforest along the Rio Pacuare, in Costa Rica, the trees are returning. The forests are growing anew. Costa Rica has doubled its forested area in just 40 years, showing that what long seemed impossible can work.
I tell anyone who says the rainforest can't return to come here. We'll show them how we've managed it.
Costa Rica can set an example for many other countries. An example of how the wonders of nature can be given a second chance, how Operation Tropical Forest can succeed, and the forests return.